The wind cuts across the Siberian tundra like a blade sharpened by ice. It does not simply touch the land. It scours it. It strips warmth from skin, breath from lungs, and color from the world. Snow moves sideways. Horizons disappear. Sound is swallowed. Above, the sky hangs pale and distant, offering no comfort. In winter, this region becomes one of the most hostile environments ever inhabited by humans. Temperatures fall past -40 degrees Celsius, past -50, down to -60. At these levels, moisture in the air crystallizes instantly. Exposed flesh freezes in seconds. Eyeballs sting. Metal becomes brittle. Plastic fractures. Even modern machinery struggles here. Batteries fail. Lubricants thicken. Engines refuse to turn. Yet for thousands of years, long before insulated jackets, satellites, or emergency shelters, people lived in this frozen world. They hunted. They raised children. They told stories. They survived. Not through luck. Through understanding. In Siberia, winter is not a season. It is a siege. For more than half the year, the land produces almost nothing. Plants vanish. Animals migrate. Rivers harden into stone. Soil locks itself beneath meters of ice. Travel becomes dangerous. Foraging becomes impossible. Mistakes become fatal. Every autumn, communities face the same question: would they be ready? The human body is poorly designed for such cold. At rest, it produces roughly 100 watts of heat, about the energy of a small light bulb. In temperate climates, this is enough. In Siberia, it is meaningless. Wind strips heat through convection. Frozen ground absorbs it through conduction. The open sky steals it through radiation. Together, they form an invisible predator. Within minutes, body temperature begins to fall. At 35 degrees Celsius, shivering begins. At 32, coordination fails. At 28, the heart becomes unstable. Below that, survival is unlikely. In extreme cold, death does not announce itself. It arrives quietly. For indigenous Siberian peoples, the Yakut, Evenki, Nenets, and Chukchi, this reality shaped every aspect of life. Food storage, migration routes, clothing design, social organization. But nothing mattered more than shelter. The home was not a place of leisure. It was a life support machine. Early builders observed a simple but powerful truth. Air is unpredictable. Earth is stable. While surface temperatures swung wildly, underground temperatures changed slowly. Below the permafrost layer, the soil remained near the yearly average. In much of Siberia, this ranged between -5 and +2 degrees Celsius. Still cold, but compared to -60, it was warmth. It was opportunity. So people went underground. Not out of desperation, out of engineering logic. They dug shallow pits into frozen soil. Half a meter, sometimes more. This work was exhausting. Permafrost had to be cracked with stone tools, antler picks, and controlled fires. Soil was thawed, chipped away, and carried out basket by basket. Weeks of labor were invested in a single structure. But the reward lasted generations. Once complete, the earth itself became insulation. Wind could no longer scour the walls. Snow piled harmlessly above. Temperature swings were softened. The house entered a different thermal zone. Above ground, low wooden frameworks were raised. Builders used local trees. Larch for strength, birch for flexibility, spruce for lightness. These woods resisted decay even in damp conditions. Logs were stacked or fitted into frames. Joints were carved by hand. Every connection mattered. A gap no wider than a finger could drain warmth overnight. So builders sealed them. With moss. With clay. With animal hair. With rendered fat. Natural materials became precision tools. Walls were layered like armor. Outer bark to shed moisture. Packed soil for mass. Turf blocks for insulation. Felted hides for sealing. Each layer slowed heat loss. Each trapped air. Each added protection. This was not superstition. It was empirical science refined across centuries. Inside, Space was carefully controlled. Large rooms waste heat. Small rooms conserve it. Most dwellings were compact. Low ceilings trapped rising warmth. Narrow corridors reduced airflow. Entrances were never direct. They descended. Cold air was forced to lose energy before reaching living space. Entryways functioned as thermal locks. A person stepped into a short tunnel, closed one door, then opened another, only then entered the main chamber. Like modern airlocks. Without rubber, without steel, only geometry and experience. Light was a weakness. Windows allowed heat to escape, so they were minimized, often no larger than a book, covered with stretched animal intestine, thin ice panels, or translucent skins. Enough light to work, not enough to freeze. The floor was never bare. First, compacted earth, then bark mats, then straw, then reindeer hides. Over years, organic debris accumulated. Food remains, slowly decomposing, releasing small amounts of heat, creating a living insulation layer. A clean, but effective. Above, the roof was a masterpiece of passive design. Wooden poles supported thick mats of grass and sod. On top, snow formed an additional barrier. Snow is an excellent insulator. Its trapped air slows heat flow dramatically. A snow-covered roof could outperform modern fiberglass. Nature finished the work. From outside, the structure almost vanished. It blended into drifts, into hills, into shadows, invisible to wind, protected from storms. Shelter alone was not enough. Heat had to be produced and managed. At the center of every home burned a fire. Controlled, precise. Wood was life. Each log represented hours of labor in lethal temperatures. Waste meant death. Early hearths were simple pits. Smoke filled the room. Eyes burned. Lungs suffered. So builders adapted. Stone rings, clay hoods, angled vents. Gradually, smoke channels formed. Primitive stoves evolved. Hot gases were forced through earthen tunnels. Under benches, along walls, beneath sleeping platforms. As smoke traveled, it surrendered heat. By the time it exited, most energy was gone, stored in mass. This was thermal banking. Charge during burning, withdraw during sleep. Walls absorbed warmth. Floors radiated slowly. Benches stayed usable. Even after flames died, heat remained. Sometimes all night. Fire was sacred. Embers were never abandoned. They were carried in bark containers, protected with ash, shared between households. A broken fire chain meant catastrophe. By early winter, families retreated underground. Movement slowed. Travel stopped. The home became a closed world. A system. Recycling heat. Recycling air. Recycling life. Here, beneath frozen soil and endless snow, humanity learned its first lesson of survival. In extreme cold, victory does not belong to the strongest. It belongs to the most patient, the most observant, the most prepared. In these buried chambers, carved from ice and earth, Siberian tribes did not fight winter. They studied it. They adapted to it. They negotiated with it. And, for another season, they endured. Inside the buried homes of Siberia, survival depended on more than thick walls and deep foundations. It depended on control. Heat had to be produced with precision, stored with patience, distributed with intelligence, protected with discipline. Every dwelling functioned as a living machine, powered by fire, sustained by animals, regulated by human behavior. Nothing was accidental. Nothing was wasted. At the center of each home stood the stove. Not a simple hearth. A thermal engine shaped by generations of experimentation. Early Siberian stoves were constructed from packed clay, river stone, and hardened earth. These materials were chosen for one reason: thermal mass. They absorbed large amounts of heat without cracking. They released it slowly, long after flames disappeared. The internal structure of the stove was complex. Hidden channels ran through its body. Hot gases were forced to follow winding paths. Upward, sideways, downward. Each turn extracted energy. Each surface absorbed warmth. Smoke exited cold. Stone remained hot. This design transformed brief fires into long heating cycles. 2 to 3 hours of burning could maintain warmth for 20. A primitive battery, charged with wood, discharged as survival. Fuel selection was critical. Not all wood burned equally. Larch provided long-lasting embers. Birch produced intense heat. Willow burned cleanly. Families mixed species deliberately. Fast ignition. Sustained output. Minimal smoke. Fire management was a science, passed through generations. Wood was harvested months in advance. Trees were felled in early autumn. Split immediately. Stacked under shelter. Dry fuel burned hotter. Wet fuel wasted energy. Poor preparation meant starvation and freezing. Fire placement followed strict logic. Stoves were built beside sleeping platforms. Heat rose into raised wooden beds. Furs trapped it. Children and elders occupied central zones. Healthy adults formed outer rings. This created a thermal hierarchy. Warmth was distributed by need. Many stoves featured flat upper surfaces. These platforms reached temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius. They became heated beds. Places of recovery. Places of birth. Places of death. In extreme cold, warmth defined life. But fire alone was insufficient. Biological heat completed the system. Animals were not kept separate. They were integrated. Reindeer, dogs, and sometimes cattle occupied adjacent chambers. Their body heat radiated continuously. A single adult reindeer produced over 400 watts. Several animals generated kilowatts.
Good job.
A living furnace. Partitions between humans and animals were low. Sometimes partial, sometimes symbolic. Air flowed freely. Heat migrated naturally. Nothing obstructed circulation. Animal presence served multiple purposes. Warmth, protection, food security. During storms, predators hunted near settlements. Keeping animals inside reduced risk and conserved energy. Waste heat was captured everywhere. Cooking stones were placed near walls. Heated rocks lined sleeping areas. Boiling pots were positioned under platforms. Steam increased humidity. Humid air retains heat better than dry air. A subtle but valuable advantage. Ventilation required perfect balance. Too little oxygen caused dizziness and death. Too much airflow caused freezing. Roof vents were adjustable. Wooden plugs sealed openings. Smoke outlets doubled as regulators. Families learned to read airflow. By sound. By flame movement. By smell. In storms, vents were nearly closed. Oxygen dropped. Fires burned low. Activity slowed. Metabolism conserved energy. Survival mode activated. Daily life revolved around heat management. Morning began with ember revival. Midday focused on wood preparation. Evenings centered on thermal charging. Night was conservation. No unnecessary movement. No repeated door openings. Every action mattered. Clothing was integrated into the thermal system. Fur-lined garments were worn indoors. Layers were rarely removed. Bare skin lost heat rapidly. Warmth was currency. Spent carefully. Food preparation followed thermal logic. Frozen meat was sliced thin. Thin slices thawed faster. Cooked faster. Used less fuel. Fat-rich diets fueled metabolism. Seal oil, reindeer fat, fish oil. Calories became internal heaters. Water was precious. Ice was melted gradually. Sudden heating cracked vessels. Controlled warming conserved energy. Every liter required effort. Every mistake cost heat. Lighting doubled as heating. Oil lamps, fat candles, firebrands, all produced warmth. No energy source served only one purpose. Efficiency ruled. Sound changed inside these homes. Thick walls muted storms. Wind became distant. Inside, voices dominated. Conversation replaced sunlight. Storytelling replaced travel. Oral tradition preserved engineering knowledge. How to seal cracks. How to repair stoves. How to survive storms. Information was inheritance. Children learned early. how to feed fires, how to adjust vents, how to conserve fuel. Mistakes were corrected instantly, sometimes harshly. Cold allowed no learning curve. Social structure mirrored thermal reality. Families clustered. Elders were protected. The sick were placed nearest heat. Individual comfort was irrelevant. Group survival was everything. Spiritual beliefs reinforced discipline. Fire spirits were honored. Ashes were respected. Letting embers die was taboo. Myth supported engineering. Faith enforced caution. During blizzards, homes entered lockdown. Entrances sealed with hides and snow. Movement ceased. Food rationed. Fires minimized. Thermal reserves preserved. Families survived weeks underground, buried, and breathing. Modern measurements confirm efficiency. Interior temperatures remained near 5 degrees, when outside fell to -60. A 70-degree difference. Without electricity, without steel, without modern insulation. Heat loss calculations validate design. Low surface area, high thermal mass, minimal leakage. Homes functioned like giant thermos flasks, scaled for humans. Failures were remembered. Collapsed roofs, blocked vents, extinguished fires. Disasters became lessons, encoded in stories, never repeated. The house was not shelter. It was a system. Fuel to fire, fire to stone, stone to air, air to body, body to culture, culture to survival. Every winter tested this machine. Every spring proved its success. Those who adapted lived. Those who ignored physics disappeared. In these buried engines of earth and flame, Siberian tribes mastered thermal survival. Not through domination, through cooperation. With animals, with landscape, with natural law. By the final months of winter, Siberia became a world suspended in stillness. Storms weakened, wind slowed. Snow hardened into vast sheets of ice. But the cold never surrendered. It remained constant, unmoving, absolute. 4 families sealed inside their underground homes. This period marked the most dangerous stage of the year. Food stores were nearly exhausted. Firewood reserves were thinning. Bodies were weakened by months of restricted movement. Survival now depended less on architecture and more on discipline, patience, and emotional control. Inside these buried chambers, time gradually lost its meaning. Days blended into nights. Weeks dissolved into darkness. Sunlight became a memory. Only fire measured existence. Glowing embers marked hours. Accumulating ash marked weeks. Diminishing fuel marked approaching risk. Life was counted in logs and sparks. Movement slowed to its minimum. Running was forbidden. Sudden gestures were discouraged. Even standing too long near entrances was avoided. Every unnecessary action released precious heat. Children learned stillness early. Adults mastered efficiency. Silence became protection. Psychological pressure intensified. Families lived in extreme proximity for months. Privacy vanished. Small irritations grew dangerous. An argument could disrupt routines. A disruption could waste energy. And wasted energy could mean death. So emotional discipline became a survival skill. Elders mediated conflicts. Storytellers eased anxiety. Songs restored calm. Mental stability preserved physical life. Illness was especially feared. Coughs spread rapidly. Wounds healed slowly. Infections had no cure. There were no doctors. No medicine. Care became technology. Warmth, nutrition, pension. The community functioned as a living hospital. Death remained an unspoken presence. Some winters claimed lives. Elders weakened. Children succumbed. Hunters injured. Loss was endured quietly. Grief was restrained. Survival demanded emotional control. Tears froze quickly. Spiritual traditions strengthened resilience. Fire spirits were honored. House guardians were respected. Ancestors were remembered. These rituals were not meaningless superstition. They reinforced discipline. They reminded families that survival was shared. They protected hope. The hearth remained sacred. Letting it die was unthinkable. A dead fire meant disaster, physically and spiritually. Flame symbolized continuity. As long as it burned, life remained possible. Embers were guarded like treasure, transported carefully, protected constantly. As winter progressed, attention shifted toward spring. Not through calendars, through observation. Snow texture changed. Ice cracked differently. Animal behavior shifted. Nature whispered its intentions. Only the attentive heard. When thaw finally approached, transition was slow. Sudden exposure caused illness. Bodies weakened by confinement required gradual adaptation. Entrances were widened carefully. Ventilation increased slowly. Light returned in stages. Survivors re-entered the outside world cautiously. Emergence was emotional. Eyes struggled with brightness. Muscles protested movement. Lungs burned with cold air. People appeared thin, but alive. Another winter endured. Knowledge preservation was essential. There were no books, no blueprints. Architecture lived in memory. Children learned through repetition, by observing elders, by assisting construction, by correcting mistakes. Skills became instinct. Tradition became technology. Modern scientists now study these systems. They recognize advanced principles: passive heating, earth sheltering, thermal mass, energy recycling. The physics matches contemporary sustainable design. What appears primitive is optimized. What seems simple is sophisticated. Modern architects increasingly revisit these ideas. Earth-covered buildings, heat storage walls, natural insulation. Ancient solutions return as modern innovations. Not out of nostalgia, out of necessity. Climate instability increases their relevance. Energy systems fail. Fuel costs rise. Resources decline. Once again, humanity searches for low-energy survival models and finds answers buried beneath Siberian snow. These underground homes were never designed for comfort. They were designed for balance, between consumption and conservation, between individual and community, between human needs and environmental limits. They taught restraint. They rewarded cooperation. They punished waste. Living inside these structures shaped character. Patience replaced impatience. Sharing replaced hoarding. Responsibility replaced selfishness. The house educated its inhabitants. Winter was the teacher. Across frozen plains and silent forests, these homes once glowed with quiet life. Children listened. Elders instructed. Animals breathed. All protected beneath soil and snow. At -60 degrees, where machines fail and steel fractures, human intelligence prevailed. Not through domination, through adaptation, through humility, through respect for natural law. When winter asked its ancient question, "Will you live?" these communities answered, with cooperation, with discipline, with knowledge, with courage. They did not conquer the cold. They learned its language. They listened. They adjusted. They endured. And in doing so, they left humanity a timeless lesson. In the harshest environments, the greatest technology is understanding.